Hey everybody, Michael Wheels Parisi. Welcome to How Not to Bombs. Everybody's got a story on how not to bomb. And as he's doing the stand-up art, the art of stand-up comedy, we would go to clubs and wait all night to get on stage. And to be honest with you, that was the way it should be done, and that's the way it is done, was done then, and should be done today, but it's not. It seems like people are looking for it right away. It's like everybody wants to do it now. Everybody wants to be big and famous now. When we started comedy, we go to clubs in Long Island and Brooklyn, Pips and Governors, and back in the day you had Chuckles, and in New York you had Catch a Rising Star, the Improv. I mean, we'd just go club hopping and for hours. We would start like 7 o'clock, wait online at an open mic, and we wouldn't end till sometimes 4 or 5 in the morning in Chinatown. We'd be eating and then going back to Long Island or wherever you're from. That was the way stand-up was done. And that is the way I believe it still should be done. As a matter of fact, I wrote a book. I'm going to tell everybody about it. It's called How Not to Bomb. That's my brand. That's why we have the show How Not to Bomb. And this is a complete guide to stand-up comedy. If you're looking to get in the business, this is a book for you. This is going to save you years and years of torment. It's just going to save you a lot of time. It's a book. It's a book about stories of how not to bomb and what to do. Even have a little inside. If you look at it, it's got like a little workbook, things you can actually work out. This should be your best friend. You should keep this in your backpack or your back pocket. And this should be the book that you take with you while you're trying to hone your act in comedy. It's called How Not to Bomb. Front cover and the back cover. It's the complete guide to stand-up comedy. Everything they don't teach you. That's what it is. Because you don't really learn. You can go to these comedy classes and you're really not learning stand-up because the class is usually taught by a person who isn't really doing it himself or herself. They just start teaching something that they don't really know. The only way you get to learn comedy is if you're doing it every night. That's the way you learn. You got to get on stage as much as you can, and you got to figure it out. You got to work it out. You got to try new jokes out. Spend time on the stage. Spend time with the audience. Learn the audience. Learn body language. Learn behavior. Learn, how to profile a person from and control the room within 30 seconds. If you're not doing that, if you're not controlling the room in at least 30 seconds. Then you're gonna have a hard time on the stage, and more than likely, it's gonna be downhill from there. And learning how to control the room, you can do that right away. You can, it can take literally 15 to 20 seconds to get that room on your side. There's things you could do to manipulate. Everything nowadays is algorithm. How do you get it's an algorithm? It's the same thing. It's an algorithm, but it's live. You're creating an algorithm for it to work, for people to jump on and like you and buy your product, which would be you as a comic, right? And that's really the ultimate. That's what it is. Stand-up comedy back in the 80s was much different. It was I don't want to say it was new, but it was definitely booming because you didn't see it. You didn't see it as much as you heard it. You heard these comedians like George Carlin, Steve Martin. You watched TV shows like I Love Lucy, Jackie Gleason, and you thought things were funny and it was great. And then you had Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, guys like that who started. George Carlin, probably I would say is one of the ones responsible probably for American stand-up comedy as we know it today as stand-up comedy. Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce was a little different though because Lenny was doing things differently, but he was still doing stand-up. He was just, he was a rebel, and he was getting banned and arrested and everything, but people bought into him, but still comedy wasn't there yet. It wasn't until, I would think, probably 81, 82, when guys like, watching it live, you had Seinfeld and guys like that, Eddie Murphy, Seinfeld, and then guys like myself came in the late 80s, and also Greg, if he can get in here. He's having a hard time with his connection. Well, nothing I could do about that. I don't know why. Let me text him. sometimes you get a bad connection. That's the beautiful thing and the bad thing about these shows. You do a show, not everybody has got the perfect connection on their side. Certain times on their side, certain days that I have a bad connection. I mean, I'm running about a gig, but let's see what Greg's saying. He's texting back. Gotta love the phone. Me text him. We're in no rush, people. We're not in a rush. Just emailing them. He's on a different kind of I guess the computer. Getting on. Oh, he's done Riverside before. So we're on the Riverside app. We're on the Riverside platform, which is a great platform because it does a lot of things for you. But there's still connection is connection, and it just happens. That's just the way it is. But he'll try. And if he doesn't get on, then we've had a cute little episode. You talk to me, and I'm going to talk, and then I'll get into something else, and we'll talk about something else till he does get here. But back to stand up, yeah. So in the '80s, when it started, so then you had you had your comics like Eddie Murphy, you had Robert Klein, David Brenner, Richard Pryor. Those were the ones that were going to the clubs and performing, and you get to watch them live. And then guys like me and Greg and guys came in the late '80s, '88, '89, '87. And you had guys, Chris Rock, Adam Sandler. Dave Chappelle, Rogan, guys like that in my generation of comedians. And you had before me, you had the Andrew Dice Clay, and you had, a roll of them. That was when the boom, Sam Kinison, the greats were all out there doing their Louis Anderson. They were all just doing their thing. And it was great. And people were just, flooding the rooms. And you go to a comedy club in Brooklyn. I started out in Pips Comedy Club in Brooklyn in end of '87. And, it could be a Wednesday night or Thursday night, and the room was packed, wall to wall. And on a Friday night, date night, Saturday night, you had everything. And people, just every date's like crazy. That's where people had first dates and, anniversaries and birthdays, and they packed the room. It was such an easy time back then. I wouldn't say it was an easy time to be a comedian. It was an easy time to get stage and perform, but it was in demand. You had to be great during that time to be able to get in front of those people. I was lucky. I ended up getting to Pips and becoming their house MC, and I was their house MC for like a year or two before I started doing, headlining it and running the shows. So I was very fortunate. I stayed around Pips. I did the New York City stuff and Long Island stuff, but I pretty much stayed in the Pips time. That was my, my club. And that's where I got to hone my act, and that's where I became really good at what I did because I was getting so much stage time. I would do Sundays. I would answer the phone at Pips. George Schultz was the owner, and then you had Marty and Seth, the two sons. George lived upstairs from the club, and George was a good friend of Rodney Dangerfield. And I believe that that is true to this day, where George Schultz is the one that gave Rodney Dangerfield the line, "I get no respect." So that is where all the greats, started there. When I was going on stage there, you had Dice would pop in, and Brenner would pop in, and Richard Lewis would pop in, and Seinfeld, and it was just great. Guys like myself, Chris Rock, and us, we would and Sandler, we'd hang out in the back. We were open micers then. We would watching the greats, and we would perform there on open mic nights. And open mic nights were on usually Wednesdays, and I think they did a Sunday night where it was open mic, but you had to be invited to it. That one. You had to be invited to that one. So that was, during that time, it was great. And we were getting the stage time. And that's where I ended up meeting Andrew, Dice, and he ended up liking me, and we befriended each other. And that's how I started opening for him, was from Pips Comedy Club. But, of course, eventually, you do the clubs in New York. And then I would go into the city and work, and then, of course, the big deal was to get with Tony Camacho back then. Tony Camacho, for those of you who don't know Tony, he ran the A rooms in New York that you got paid in. Not in the city, but like in Jersey and in the outskirts, upstate New York. he would be the guy that, if you got with Tony Camacho, you were playing Rascals Comedy Club in Ocean Township or in West Orange, those two clubs, the Magnuson brothers, and Tony booked them, and that's where you wanted to play. You got paid, you had a great meal, and you got to perform in such a great environment, and you really built your confidence up, because the confidence was, you were in front of these crowds, and now you're getting paid. So Tony was like one of the guys that would pay the first pay. He wasn't the guy who only paid. There were other comedians other bookers out there as well, but they would try to take advantage of the comedians. They would use them and pay them shit money, And a lot of them took advantage, but you did it anyway because you wanted to. You wanted to work, so you did it, and that's just the way it was. But nowadays it's so saturated. I mean, everywhere you go, they're doing an open mic night. They do them in laundromats in Los Angeles on Fountain. There was a laundromat there, like on Fountain and like Crescent Heights. I guess it was Crescent. I don't know if it's the exact street, but they would do an open mic night in the laundromat. And then it started taking off, where you were playing the laundromats, playing back rooms of 7-Elevens. I don't know. It was just crazy. They had all these. It just became too saturated. I always say, if you want to be a comedian, and I say it in the book, How Not to Bomb, if you want to be a comedian, you got to go where comedians perform. You got to go to a place where it's in the name, comedy club, where people are going to see comedy. People that are going to a laundromat to wash their clothes, whites and coloreds. That's what we call them. You had your whites and you had your coloreds, the clothes. They're going to wash the clothes. They're not interested in watching a person talk about their day. Usually they're dressed like shit because they're wearing, the clothes that they're not washing. It's the laundry doing day clothes. And they're not into it. Or if you go to these coffee houses, and they used to have like stand up at coffee houses. I get it, I understand, and people would, try to hide behind, oh, it's good writing. It's okay, but you're not gonna become anything out of a coffee house. You got to get into the clubs. The main goal when you're in Los Angeles, when you get out there, is you need to be at the Comedy Store, the Laugh Factory, the Improv. Nothing else matters. I don't care what it is. I don't care about the clubs in the Valley. I don't care about the clubs out in West LA. You're either at the Comedy Store, number one, the Laugh Factory, or the Improv. Those are the clubs you wanted to be in. And, that was it. Nothing else. It didn't matter. We have Kevin Vasquez in the room. The Shrek 5 trailer looks good. And I heard they're making a Michael Jackson Part 2 biopic. Well, that's great, Kevin. I'm glad you're... I'm glad you got to say something. I guess. People ask people come in the room, and we have that luxury now to be able to have people chatting. So if you want to join the How Not to Bomb studio, you can join the studio and you can chat. Like Kevin just did. He wanted to make sure that he let us know they're having a biopic too. Is it biopic or biopic? We don't really know. We don't really give a fuck. Back to the comedy thing. So, the coffee houses. So you have to play the main clubs. You got to be around where the industry is going. You got to be in these clubs where the people of your like are trying to also make it. You don't go to LA until you're ready. You don't start comedy in LA or Vegas. You start comedy in another place, learn the act, get your first 20 minutes, and work it from there. Then you go to LA, you go on stage, you showcase, and it's like starting all over again. Just because you could be a headliner in Omaha, Nebraska. You could be headlining all the bullshit rooms out there that nobody cares about, and then go to LA and thinking, you got a big head on your shoulder, thinking, I'm headlining rooms. No, you're starting all over again, brother. Nobody knows who you are. The industry don't care that you played the Chuckle Hut in fucking in Omaha. They don't care about that. It's not on their radar. They want to know how you do in front of a diverse audience. And you're going to get the best and the hardest audiences you're going to get at the Comedy Store, Laugh Factory, and Improv, especially the Comedy Store. That was my home. Comedy Store was my home. The goal at the Comedy Store was to get to LA and become a paid regular at the Comedy Store. That's what you wanted. You wanted to get your name on the Wall of Fame. Because once you got paid and you started rocking and rolling, then Mitzi would put your name on the wall. If you go to the Comedy Store to this day, if you look over here, you see I'm in front of my name at the Comedy Store. That's the Wall of Fame. There's my name at the Comedy Store. That's where you want to be. That gives you validation, and then it gives you the confidence that you're finally doing something, whether you're making a lot of money or not, because you're not making the money at the showcase. We call them showcase clubs in L.A., Comedy Store, Laugh Factory, Improv. They're showcase rooms. They pay you very minimally in the rooms, and then but you get to work out in front. Your life can change because you get to work out in front of like industry. Almost, everybody in L.A. is in show business, so. You never know who's going to be in the room back then, and to this day, you just don't know who's going to be in the room. You heard the other podcast I had. We had Bill Branca on the show, who was one of those guys. If he was in the room and he liked you and he wanted to work with you, you were done. You might as well just go pick a home out somewhere. You're gonna get paid. I remember when Joe Rogan came out to L.A. and Rogan was in a TV show. He got he was like he hit the number before he even got there. Rogan never really struggled in Los Angeles. I don't think he really struggled even in New York, and he worked. And we would see him at Governors and these rooms, but he never struggled in LA because he came into LA. He had a deal already with a television show, and I do forget the name of the show, and it wasn't news radio. It was another show. He got like $500,000 to do a TV show that only aired. It was a season, only aired one episode, and only half of the episode aired. Half of the country only saw the episode. And then it was canceled immediately. And I forgot the name of it. Something to do with baseball, whatever. But that's what happened to him. He had it made, actually. And Joe was a good guy. We would work a lot together. We'd go to La Jolla. He would pick me up at my apartment. I lived on Horn. He would pick me up there with his car. He always had a fast car, I forget the name. He had a silver car that was so fast. And we would drive to San Diego and play the Comedy Store in San Diego a few times together, and we'd laugh and have a fun time, and he would go like 110 miles an hour the whole way there. We'd get to San Diego in like an hour and 45 minutes. It was amazing. But he was a good guy. And he started the podcast, and now he's great, and Joe's doing fantastic. And but he was destined to make it. A lot of people don't think he's funny on stage. A lot of people think he's great as a host, and he's not funny on stage. I beg to differ. I think Joe is very funny on stage. Joe knows how to light a room up. Joe's a pro. He's a killer comedian. Guys like that, Joey Diaz, killer comedian. These guys go on stage and they wreck the fucking room. I'm known for that too. People have talked about it. I'm not going to get and brag about myself, but I'm known to wreck a room. Chappelle, guys like that, wrecking the room. This is what you get when you're a pro and you learn how to control the room. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. You got to be able to wreck that room, people. I'm just texting Greg, and then I'll get back into it. So that was the luxury of being in Los Angeles. If you got picked. I actually became a regular at the Laugh Factory before I became a regular at the Comedy Store. Became a Laugh Factory regular in 1990, and then I auditioned for Mitzi at the Comedy Store the first time. She didn't pass me on Dice's recommendation, and it didn't matter who recommended you. The recommendation would get you in the store, but the recommendation wouldn't get you in the store. If you know what I mean. You didn't get passed unless she wanted to pass you. And when she first saw me the first time, she was like, you're not ready yet. You remind me too much of Mitchell Walters. I was wearing a hat, like an Apple Bop hat, like those hats. And she just didn't see it. And then the second time, 6 months later, I did it again, and she loved me. She didn't even remember the first time, all because I didn't wear the hat. And the second time I walked on stage, that was it. That noise behind me, by the way, is my landscaper. If you hear that, I'm in my home studio. He just happened to be at 4:22. He decides, let me go fucking blow the lawn. Should have done this at 9 o'clock in the morning when all the other landscapers. What does he got an accounting job? This guy. He can't get to my lawn until 4:30. Every landscaper, wherever you go, 6 in the morning, they're mowing. This guy, 4:30, he's starting to do the blow and the mow. The fuck? What kind of landscaper is he? So that's how it was. Then when you got to the Comedy Store, Mitzi passed you, you started getting spots, and then you still couldn't get into the main room. You started working in the original room. But you couldn't get into the main room. It would take about a year or two before you can get in. Because, main room, you got real money. The original room, they paid you like $12.50 a set. And then the main room, when you got into the main, and you were finally able to play the main room on the weekends, you would make a piece of the door, so you could walk out of there. Those days, literally, you can make $1,000 on the weekend if the room is slamming. I mean, there were guys in there. You had comedians in the Comedy Store that just, if they were playing there, you were pretty much, if you were doing the main room, you were a killer comedian. Either you were a killer comedian or you were banging Mitzi Shore. That's how it worked. You had guys that didn't belong on the main room stage that Mitzi was banging, Danny Stone, guys like that, who's not around anymore, so I shouldn't talk shit about him. But there's a lot, and I don't want to mention the other guys' names. There are tons of them. Mitzi was known for having a little bit of the casting couch going on, and you would get the spots. And you knew right away who was banging Mitzi because you would see the comedian bombing on stage, and you'd be like, well, this must be a new one. So you knew right away there was an issue because there were guys that, that just didn't cut the mustard. Comedy Store was a crazy time during those days, because during the 90s, it wasn't as busy as it is today, because now it's like crazy busy every night of the week. But back then, it was like the lonely days of the Comedy Store. A lot of crazy shit was going on, waitresses banging comedians. You go backstage in the main room, because comedians ran the show there. The manager at the Comedy Store had no say in what Mitzi's comedians can do whatever they wanted. We can run. We could walk in anywhere, any door, any room. We could be anywhere we wanted to. We can just go hang out in the main room on a dark night, just hang out in the booth, and whatever you want to do, you did. You could smoke pot wherever you fucking wanted. I mean, pretty much there were no rules. Mitzi loved her comics. A lot of comedians who didn't quite have it on the showcase, sometimes she thought they had potential. She'd put them as a doorman. Or she'd give him a bar back job, like Carlos Mencia, Carlos Mencia, his real name is Ned. He's not even Mexican. He's half German, half Honduran. Anyway, he started out as a bar back. A lot of people, Sam Kinison was a doorman. David Letterman worked there. A lot of comedians worked their way in that way. And then a lot of comedians, worked their way in another way. That's just the way it worked. But to get in the Comedy Store was a major. And I don't think Greg is going to be in the show today. He says he don't know why he can't get on. I'm telling him I'm still here if you can get on. If not, no worries. We will do it again. It makes it easy when you say it, when you're typing and texting and you're saying the words like, I didn't have to tell you exactly what I bet. It makes it feel better. But so the Comedy Store days back then, you just did whatever you wanted to. There'd be like guys in the back getting blowjobs from fans backstage. You'd be walking back there and you catch them. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'll go in the other room. They were just in the bathroom. What was going on? It was crazy. You had the days of just wild stuff going on back then. I don't want to get too in detail of the Comedy Store sacred list of things that happened, but there's an actual place in the Comedy Store, in a location of the Comedy Store that is the place where you go and smoke weed. Sacred grounds, they call it. You got to know where it is. You just go back there and you can just join the weed circle. It's always something going on back there. I mean, this was before weed was even legal. There was so much of it going on. I mean, it was always legal to us because you just go to the Comedy Store and there was plenty of it to get high. Because we were broke back then. We didn't have any money, I remember one time Eddie Griffin and I didn't have enough money, so we were trying to see how much we had on us because we wanted to go split a turkey sandwich at Greenblatt's because they were like $15 then for a turkey on rye. And Eddie's like, how much you got, Wheels? And I'm like, we're divvying it up. And I think he was sleeping in the Comedy Store at that time. A lot of comics did that too. They didn't have a place to live. Mitzi would let them stay overnight. You just couldn't walk out, otherwise the alarm would go off. You had to wait till the next morning. So you were able to sleep there, but you couldn't leave until the next morning, otherwise the alarms would go out. But anyway, me and Eddie kind of drummed up enough money together to go have a turkey sandwich at Greenblatt's, and I think he went back to the store. We got there before it closed. He stayed overnight. I walked back to my apartment on I was living on Doheny Drive at the time, and plenty of nights we didn't have any money. I remember stopping at the Pink Dot. I used to love their Mile High Club. Tuna Club was great. And then when I really didn't have money, literally nothing in my pocket, maybe $1 or $2, I'd go to the AM/PM when I would walk home. And I would buy a hot dog, but I would eat like 4. And I would down a fucking bag of fries, but I would only pay for like 1 hot dog. I was so fast. I was like known for it, for the hot dog. Nobody knew I was doing it. I never got caught. So they always have hot dogs, fries. Like they'd have these chicken. The corn dog. I could knock out 4 corn dogs back in 1990 like it was nothing, But when I got to LA, I was fortunate. When I first got there, I came out there to do a movie called Dice Rules, where I played Dr. Slaughter, and it was with Andrew Dice Clay. He brought me out to do the movie, and then I decided I wanted to move out to LA. So I lived with him. I was living in this one motel that Mitzi Shore owned, the Sunset Motor Lodge. Don Barris, if you know who he is, he's actually the warm-up. Well, Don is the warm-up act for Jimmy Kimmel, and Don Barris was actually working the front desk at the hotel. So that's how I met Don, because I went there and told him, getting into the Comedy Store. He let me have a room, so I had a free room there, and it was great. Me and Don would hang all night, and other comedians, and then it started getting dangerous because there were gangbangers that were living in the hotel. They were called the TJ Locos. And they were like this Mexican street gang, but real gangbangers, guns and everything. And they were basically living in all the different rooms, and that was their hotel. But they were convinced that I was in the mob because Don Barris would tell them, this guy's in the Italian mob from New York. He's here hiding out. He would tell them. So they were scared. Not that they were scared of me, but they gave me the utmost respect. So they made it their job to protect me, basically. They wanted to do everything they can to protect me from getting hurt. Meanwhile, I'm hanging outside one night, me and Don are chilling out smoking. I was smoking a cigarette when I smoked in those days, and there was a drive-by shooting because somebody was trying to, shoot them, and I'm now in the middle of a drive-by shooting. So that was scary. And I said, thanks for protecting me. But I ended up running into a room and, not mine. I just ran into some random room because they were shooting at each other. But that's when Dice said to me, listen, you got to, you can't be here. He would pick me up every day and we'd do our thing, but then he would drop me off there. I'm like, I can't. He's like, you can't live here. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I ain't got enough money to, get a place right now. So he ended up taking me to his house up in Hollywood Hills, and I stayed with Andrew for like 3 months. I had my own little room there. He treated me like gold. Him and his wife and kids were there, and then, the kids were babies then. Dylan wasn't even born then. It was Max, and he treated me like like family. And he gave me a beautiful room, my own bathroom, and we would hang out a lot. And he mentored me back in those days. I owe him a lot for that. And when I found my first apartment, he helped me. He called them and said, told them who he was, and this is my guy, and don't worry about it. If he doesn't pay the rent, I'll make sure he pays the rent. And he got me my first place. I was paying $420 a month on Doheny Drive, on the borderline of Beverly Hills and West Hollywood, 1021 North Doheny Drive, and right by the Geffen building. I had a small little room, but the size of a bedroom, and it had a bathroom in there, no kitchen. It was a room and a bathroom and a vanity. No hot plate, no nothing. And then I ended up going into the single that was next door after a while, and that was $575 a month back then on rent control. And I ended up having a kitchen but in a big room, and I had like a little TV, and it was nice, a little bigger, like 500 square feet, whatever, like a suite. It was very nice, nice kitchen, and I really enjoyed that. But yeah, he got me in there, helped me with that, and I stayed with him for 3 months until I got my own place, and then that would be it. I would walk to the Comedy Store every night, and it was a great time back then in LA at the Comedy Store, and I have a lot of memories. Made a lot of friends. Back in those days, you see a lot of these guys now. They're all rolling. And I'm doing well for myself, thank God. I'm blessed that I've done very well in comedy and in the food industry, so I'm blessed not to have to worry anymore. But it was a struggle back then. But you have to put the struggle in, I really think, and I believe you have to put that struggle in to do it. Because if you don't, and you're just always high, and, high on the hog, meaning, you never really see what it's like, and you don't relate to the audience, Because here you are, struggling, you don't have a penny in your pocket, and you're performing to an audience who are spending money to be there, and you're making them laugh. You're in control of their sound effects, in other words. In a sense of humility there, but it's also a sense of power. And then when you start making money, it's nice, and you start getting those paid gigs and leaving LA for the weekend, and all the other comics like, oh, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to be in Vegas for the weekend. I'm performing at the Riviera, for Shrippa. Actually, me and Joe Rogan did the Riviera together also. We did the Extreme Comedy Night. It was funny. We got paid all this money to do 2 nights there, weekend. And we got paid more money than the comedians that were actually doing the whole week. And I forgot what the money was like. But so me and Joe did that together. That's where I got to meet Shrippa. And Steve Shrippa is who's on The Sopranos. He played the big guy. I forgot what his name was. I'm not a fan of Shrippa. He wasn't a very nice guy to me back then, nor anyone for that matter. He'd give you the gigs and stuff, but he called me up. He told me, "Hey, Parisi," because he knew I was connected to some guys in New York, and he heard that the mob was kind of like bankrolling me, and they were helping me out, and that I was with Dice, and he wanted to show his masculinity by calling me up in my room saying, listen, I'm letting you perform here, but I got to tell you, there's only one fucking boss here. I'm the guy. I'm like, all right, whatever, and he kind of had a bad taste in my mouth with Steve. So I wasn't a fan. He was a bit of a jerk off to me. A lot of people are assholes to you on the way up, As you're trying to do things, they feel they could try to keep you down. He made like a big deal. Here's 2 drink tickets. Don't abuse it. How am I going to abuse 2 drink tickets? If you give me 2 drink tickets, all I can have is 2 drinks. How am I going to abuse it? People say the stupidest shit. So Steve Shrippa was one of those guys I just never fucking liked. Even when I see him on Instagram now, I just don't like him. He always has his little dog with him. His dog is eating out of off the same spoon he is. I mean, it's schivats. You know what I mean? It's schivats. So I'm not here to badmouth people, but when it comes up in my conversation, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you how I feel about that person. I mean, as much as Mitzi Shore, was crazy, I loved Mitzi. I mean, Mitzi was a wonderful person. She helped a lot of people out. She gave us a platform. She gave us a stage. She gave us the key to the building, basically, to do what we needed to do to succeed. She gave us those tools. I remember not having any money, not having a cell phone back then. We go to the Comedy Store during the day and go into the main room and sit in the Mitzi booths. There was a phone there, right? A little black phone right there, And we would be able to use the phone and call, I'd call my mom and my friends, let them know I'm okay, So it was nice. She gave us that, dial 9, you get outside line. It was just a time where, to this day, comedians talk about the Comedy Store. And there's just a lot of stories, there are endless stories of hanging out in the back parking lot. You never know who was going to show up that day. Richard Pryor pulling up, with his then wife, and he wasn't doing too well back then. He couldn't walk. He was in a wheelchair. Chewy was the doorman. For those of you who remember those days, Chewy was the doorman, and Freddie Soto was working at the Comedy Store before he ended up doing well. And I love both of them. Chewy was great. Freddie was a wonderful guy. Loved them both. And they would be the guys to go and help Richard Pryor get on the stage. It'd be him. It'd be Freddie Soto would be driving. Chewy would help him when he got there. and Johnny Zapp. So it would be Chewy and Johnny Zapp, and I think both of them have passed. All three of them actually are not alive anymore. Plus Richard Pryor, there's four not alive anymore that we're talking about. That wasn't too long ago. And they would all bring him and walk him to the stage. Or sometimes he would sit in the back with Mitzi. And I remember I was on stage one of the great stories when I met Richard Pryor. I was on stage and Richard Pryor was hanging out with Mitzi, and I was on stage and I was killing, and I was doing my job. I was working out new material, and I was just bam, bam. I was rapid fire. I'm a rapid fire comic. I just get on a rampage and it's over. You're gonna walk out with a fucking stomach ache. So when I get off the stage, I'm walking past Richard and Mitzi sitting in the chair, and Richard took my hand. Is the fucking landscaper again? You hear him? Look at this. 437. You can't stop. Richard pulls my hand. He goes, "You're one funny motherfucker. You're gonna get paid, motherfucker. You're gonna get paid. You're gonna get paid." And I just loved it. And I was like, I was dumbstruck. I didn't know what to say. It was crazy. Another guy, Chevy Chase. If you know Chevy, not known to be the nicest guy in the world, actually, and one of my favorite comedy actors. Guy's brilliant, but not known in the business to be that funny. I was on stage one night, and again, killing it, because I would get that prime spot, 10, 11 o'clock. Sometimes I'd close the show 1 o'clock when no one was in the audience. It's the comedians watching you, because comedians would watch other comedians in front of 2 people, 3 people, because how funny can you be, So we just started doing inside jokes to make people laugh. At that point, we were just making our friends laugh. But anyway, I get off stage at one night when I did a great set, and Chevy Chase comes over to me. He goes, "I got to tell you, man." He goes, "You are amazing, very funny." I said, "Well, thank you. I appreciate it." He goes, "I wish I can do what you do." I'm like, "You wish you can do what I do?" I said, "I wish I can do and be what you are. Everything you do. You're one of my favorites. Not to be, I'm not trying to be like a little bitch here, but you're one of my top guys." So for a guy who has a bad reputation of not being the nicest guy in the world, he was lovely to me, fantastic, and paid me the biggest compliment. Another night, another comedy store story. I'm in the main room at this point, and I was, again, having a great set in the main room. I wouldn't say I was killing as much as I felt I would do in the original room. To me, I always thought the original room was the funnier of the rooms. I always thought, it was the better room for comedians. It was more intimate, closer to the stage. Audience was right there, and I can play with them. Where the main room, it's far back. You're on the stage. It's more of a lights, camera, action, showtime, beautiful room. You had to work for every laugh. But anyway, I was there on a night, and I was doing a great set. I had a great set. I know when I kill, and I know when I have a great set. I was having a great set, and Tupac Shakur happened to be in the audience. And I walked out with Tupac. I walked out past Tupac when I was leaving, and he's another guy who I saw in the hallway. He came over to me. He goes, "Man," he goes, "you were so funny." He goes, "I am such a fan." He goes, "Very nice guy, Tupac. And I just loved watching you up there. It's amazing. You mesmerized me." I'm like, "Well, thank you, man." That was like, to me, one of the biggest compliments ever. From Tupac. And then it just so happened 2 weeks later, he was shot, killed. I'll never forget it. I almost want to say I was probably the last comedian that Tupac seen, because it was like 2 weeks later. That was it. Another great story. George Carlin, who's my personal comedy idol, was at the Comedy Store one night rehearsing for one of his HBO specials. And when George did comedy, he didn't do it organically. It was written, and he was working it out. And I was watching him, and I feel if you want to get into business, you need to watch the greats. And even though during that part of my life, I was considered one of the great comics of my generation, I would pay homage to guys of the generation before me. So I would always make it my point to be the student and watch guys like that. Dice, Carlin, Kinnis, guys like that were just killers from their generation. No matter how great I was killing on stage, I needed to watch. And I think most comics will agree with me in my generation of comics, no matter how big we are, how big they are, even bigger than I am, I only made it to a certain level. These guys blew up. Will say to you that they will go and watch another comedian from another generation who was one of the greats to learn. You just learn. So anyway, my point is, Carlin was on stage, and he got off stage, and at the end of the night, I saw him in the back again. Everybody hung out in the parking lot, because if you were a paid regular, first of all, you were allowed to park on the lot. It was a privilege to be able to park on the lot. So you wanted to become paid because you couldn't afford the $20 next door at the Hyatt. You can park on the lot. So if you're a paid regular, meaning you got your name on the wall and you were paid, you got to park on the lot. So anyway, we would all hang out in the back, and those are the ones who were all paid comics, and we were all making money there, and we were in the elite club of the Comedy Store back then. Anyway, George Carlin, I run over to him and I just say, and I'm not trying to be starstruck because, after a while you get desensitized in the business, but there are certain people that to this day will, you just can't believe you're meeting this person, because I grew up on Carlin, listening to every album he had and did, Occupational Fool, Place for My Stuff. I mean, just every album, Place to Keep Your Stuff. And I went over to him and I said, listen, I got to tell you, man, my name is Michael Wheels Parisi. I'm a comic, been doing it probably about 10 years. And you are my absolute idol, and probably the reason why I'm in the comedy store doing comedy as a stand-up. You were such an inspiration to me. And he's like, hey, that's cool, man. Hey, listen, got any weed? It's like he didn't care about anything else. He just wanted to know if I can get him some weed. I'm like, I absolutely do. And I got to enjoy. We went in the back, him and I, and we got to smoke a joint together. Him and I were just, for the first maybe 10 minutes before somebody walked out there to smoke with us. But, here I am with George Carlin smoking weed at the Comedy Store with my comedy idol, can't even believing it, and then watching him on stage work and hone his act and how he did it, which is much different than how my generation does it. Like he would literally write his act and memorize the act word for word. If you notice with Carlin, he never really dips into the stage. He does his act. So if he messes up, he says, wait a minute, let me go back to that, and he'll do it again. He's working his act. You're privileged to be in the audience to watch this man work. If he makes a mistake, he's rewinding the act and doing it again. This is what he does. And then it comes out to a piece of art. Where comedians in my generation, I think we do a lot of the writing on the stage. We do a lot of the writing, riffing with each other and bouncing jokes off and brainstorming together, having little, I don't want to say writing sessions. That's so cliche because we don't do that. It's more or less just smoking a couple of joints, hanging out at Jerry's Deli and coming up with material. Me personally, I never wrote a joke to paper. I just go on stage and start working it out. And then if I'm comfortable with that joke, I remember it. And I just remember all the good stuff. And I'll write down like a set list, but I won't write the joke. I just don't believe in writing the joke because I believe in that it should be organic, sound organic every time you say it. And that's how I like to do it. And a lot of comedians do that. A lot of comedians will write. That's why, again, not to give a shameless plug, but in the book How Not to Bomb, which is available on Kindle and Amazon, and also it's available on paperback. So you can actually buy the book on Amazon on paperback and on Kindle, and you can read the book. I recommend getting the paperback version because there's a lot of work methods in the book, but it explains to you the art and technique of writing the joke and coming up with the set. How Not to Bomb. So yeah, Amazon. But so coming up with the set is very important. So there's an art to doing it. It's not just, if you ever watch a comedian on stage, a lot of them sound like they're reading the joke. They're not selling the joke. They're not selling the bit. They're reading the bit and it sounds read or it sounds hack, And what I mean by hack is just old, hey, three guys walking the bar, that kind of bullshit. You never notice, when you're, everybody wants to be your Evan Notice. Seinfeld, first of all, noticed everything. So don't be the Evan Notice comedian because you're going to come off hacky. Dating relationships, you could tell when they're hacks. Black guy goes on stage talking about the difference between black and white. It's hack. White guy talking about, relationships with his girlfriend. It's hack. Be original. Be an original. I can't stress that enough. To be an original and just do your own thing. That's why there are great comedians out there now, and even ones that after my generation. For instance, I've mentioned it before. Sebastian Maniscalco is amongst one and others that I have actually hand delivered to the Comedy Store. I saw Sebastian at the Four Seasons Hotel. He was a waiter, waiting tables, and he would come to the Comedy Store, and he would work out his open mic. I saw him in an open mic night, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and there was just something about Sebastian that I liked. I clicked into him, and I said, "This guy, something about him." You can tell talent. I have an eye for it. I just have an eye for talent. So I'm watching Sebastian. I'm saying, this guy's good. And I said, well, could be lucky, Let me watch him again. So the Sunday after, I see him again. He would come in between shifts from the Four Seasons. He'd walk in there with a bow tie, like going on stage, and he has to get back to the Four Seasons to finish his order. This is how dedicated he was to get on stage. So he comes to the Comedy Store again. I saw him. He worked out, and he again, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, killed it. In his world, when I say kill, doing great for that level. And as an open micer, and I said, Sebastian, my name is Wheels, and I'd like to sponsor you and get you in the Comedy Store and get you a showcase for Mitzi, because I really feel that you have what it takes to become a star. I really feel that way, and I just don't go to bat for anybody, but I would like to do that for you. And he goes, I'd love that. So I get him a showcase for Mitzi, and I sat next to Mitzi during the showcase, because you had to sit next to her you didn't have to, but you wanted to, because if you didn't sit next to her while your sponsee was on stage, the person you were sponsoring, another comedian would sit there and get in her ear, because they were jealous. They didn't want that person to pass. So they would get in her ear and they would take her attention away from that comedian. So I made sure I sat next to her and said, you got to watch. And she watched him. And I was on that kind of level with Mitzi. We loved each other. I would do a lot for her. She would do a lot for me. And she watched him and loved him and made him a paid regular. He was walking out. He didn't know what to say. Mitzi goes, you pass, call for spots. He didn't even know what that meant. And I said, I had to tell him, this is what you do. You call for your spots on a Monday or Sunday or Monday. Call your spots and let them know when you're available. And then they're going to start booking you as a paid regular. Good, congratulations, good luck. And Sebastian appreciated that. And I never asked for anything from Sebastian to this day. I never say, listen, I was the one who, he knows it. He talked about it in his book. You could read the book and see where he says Michael Wheels Parisi was one of the reasons, for my career. He gave me credit. I got him, in front of the right people. I got Dice to see him. He started opening with Dice. We would do it together at the Stardust, me, Dice, and Sebastian. And then listen, and then that was it. Sebastian did his own thing, and I take no credit for anything after that. I only take credit for finding him and bringing him to the right person. I'm not taking credit for his career. And he thanked me for it numerous times. He thanked me on the Howard Stern show when everybody used to watch it. Nobody really watches or listens to him much anymore, apparently. But back in the day when Stern was popular. So, yeah, there's a lot going on with the Comedy Store. The stories are endless. Maybe one day we'll talk about it again. I'm sorry that Greg Vaccarello couldn't get on the show today. He was having technical difficulties. But he'll definitely be back on the show. We'll definitely get him on the show for sure. And, he'll do the show. I mean, it's just a matter of whatever on his side. He said he had a strong internet connection. I don't know what it was. But we ended up doing the show, and this is the Comedy Store edition. And thank you very much, everybody, for listening to the show. Again, my name is Michael Wheels Parisi. I'm the host of How Not to Bombs. Everybody's got a story. And tonight, this was a complete different story. But sometimes a story writes itself, right? That's the way it is, and I'll see you next week.